I knew things were circling the corporate drain the moment I got an Outlook invite titled Mandatory FUN Plus Family, Thanksgiving Initiative Turkey Briefcase. Mandatory on Thanksgiving. That's when I knew some idiot had finally weaponized the word festive. 3 weeks earlier, I'd planned on spending the holiday the same way I did every year. Reheated stuffing, a half-dead scented candle from last year's company White Elephant, and the warm, flickering glow of absolutely no human contact. Just me, my cat, and a paperback mystery novel from the 1980s with a woman on the cover wearing shoulder pads and holding a gun like she's never touched one in her life. Bliss. But then Trent happened. Trent, for the uninitiated, is the CEO's 28-year-old nephew. No resume, no references, just a winning smile and an MBA from somewhere that definitely had Greek letters on the buildings, but not much in the way of coursework. They hired him as director of people strategy, which, near as I can tell, means wandering around with an oat milk latte and saying things like, "Let's synergize Q4 morale to people trying to fix the printer." I reported to him now. Me. After 19 years of wrangling vendor contracts, juggling 7 calendars, and once keeping a $12M audit from blowing up because I bribed an IRS guy with his favorite barbecue. But now I got to explain things like how email folders work to a man who unironically called himself a disruptor. Oh, and he hated me. Not in a loud way. In that smug, performative, "Wow, you're still here?" way, like I was office furniture that could type. I was told by 3 separate people that he referred to me as Patty from payroll, despite the fact I work in operations and, frankly, payroll Patty quit 2 years ago when they made her share a desk with a ficus. So when he dropped by my desk the Monday before Thanksgiving, reeking of expensive cologne and unearned confidence, I braced myself. He leaned on my cubicle wall, took a dramatic sip of whatever seasonal drink he was using to cover up the scent of Jim's socks and Axe body spray, and said, "You don't have a life, do you? Just work Thanksgiving? Cool. We're doing a company event, execs and their families. Make it happen." He said cool like it was already done, like I was the intern and he was doing me a favor by letting me touch his genius. I stared at him, blinked once. Then I smiled, tight, practiced. The kind of smile you give someone just before they step on a rake. "Of course, Trent," I said. "I'll handle everything." And reader, I did handle everything. Before we go any deeper, if you're enjoying this little tale of turkey-flavored vengeance, go ahead and tap that subscribe button and hit like. It keeps stories like this coming and helps the team know we're not just screaming into the void. Okay, back to the chaos. See, I didn't argue, didn't push back. I followed every single line of his culture refresh memo, the one he emailed company-wide 3 days after starting, with a subject line that read, "Time to reboot the vibe." Buried in the 3rd paragraph, under a quote he misattributed to Steve Jobs, was a new directive. All department-led morale events must go through his office, use pre-approved vendors, and be coded under the new executive morale subsection B budget line. Cute, so I used the vendor, the expensive one he picked, the one that charged $40 per chair and $22 for gluten-free stuffing. I booked the hall, sent the invites, scheduled the string quartet. I even included his preferred linen color, eggshell resilience, and every step of the way I documented. Paper trail like a crime scene, his signature on the requisition form, his check mark on the budget code approval, his little smiley face next to the words "Great Vibes Only" at the bottom of the email chain. What he didn't realize, bless his soy-scented soul, was that Executive Morale Subsection B was a new addition thanks to some SEC compliance tweaks after our last audit debacle. And those tweaks, they made one thing very, very clear. Any expense under that code over $5,000 required a board-level officer to co-sign. And Trent wasn't even authorized to approve a $20 Staples receipt. But I said nothing. Because sometimes, revenge doesn't look like shouting in the break room or slashing tires in the parking lot. Sometimes it looks like a perfectly catered Thanksgiving dinner with a signature missing from the bottom line, and that was just the appetizer. The first time Trent opened his mouth in the all-hands meeting, half the room thought it was a prank. A joke, some experimental theater about how far nepotism could stretch before it snapped. But no, Trent was real, and somehow worse than imagined. He strolled in wearing sneakers that cost more than my monthly grocery bill, smacking gum like he was timing a punchline. He introduced himself as Trent Dalton, Director of People Strategy. No one asked what that meant. I think we all knew it didn't mean anything. He had that look, the kind you get when you've never been told no and still think that's because you're special. At the meeting, he used the word vibes 9 times. I counted. Once while describing HR, once while discussing layoffs. He even said we were going to sunset legacy behaviors, which I later translated as fire anyone who remembers when this place functioned. Then, eyes locked on me, he grinned and said, "Some folks like Patricia here, they are the legacy. The kind of person who will die in a cubicle, right? But no shade, we love the lifers." Everyone laughed, not the nice kind. The kind people do when they're checking if it's safe to breathe. I smiled. Of course I smiled. Because what was I supposed to do? Throw a stapler at him in front of the CFO? He didn't stop there. Later that afternoon, I was at the Keurig trying to get the last sputtering drop of stale pumpkin spice when he walked up behind me and muttered, "So, what are you doing for Thanksgiving, besides emailing at 2 a.m. like always?" I said I hadn't made plans. He snorted. "Figures. You don't have a life, do you? Just work." I turned. He was sipping from his personalized thermos, one of those overpriced metallic ones with a sticker that said "Rise and Grind, baby." Like he was a walking parody of hustle culture, except instead of actually doing anything, he delegated it to me. Then came the cherry on the passive-aggressive Sunday. "Cool, let's lean into that. I want to host a mandatory holiday event. Get the execs, their kids, spouses, whatever. Food, music, games, like a company family thing. Shouldn't be hard, you love planning stuff." I blinked. "On Thanksgiving?" He shrugged. "What better time for gratitude, right? Besides, the team needs morale." It took everything in me not to laugh. Morale. He hadn't been here 3 weeks and he was already trying to host a company party on the most sacred of American days, the day of avoiding family by claiming you have to base something. And now, he wanted to drag everyone out of their homes and into a faux festive team-building hostage situation, with me as the crew's director. "I'll need an approved vendor list," I said. "I already picked one," he said, waving his phone at me like that was a sufficient answer. "They do those cool grazing boards, like Bougie Lunchables. Real Instagram moment stuff." Of course he did. He walked off humming a pop song I'm pretty sure he thinks he discovered. Left me standing there, alone with the stale coffee and the looming reality that I was going to have to plan a damn holiday gala for a bunch of people who'd rather be anywhere else, for a boss who thought empathy was a line item on a slide deck. The worst part? I knew no one would stop him. The CEO, his uncle, had already told us during his last town hall that family's the foundation of this company. We just didn't know he meant his family. I went back to my desk and pulled up the event request template. I opened a new folder on the shared drive, Thanksgiving Initiative Trent, and I started the clock because I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make sure the receipts could sing. I didn't rush. That's the key to proper sabotage, patience. You have to move slow enough that no one notices the teeth until they're already bleeding. Trent wanted a holiday event. I was going to give him a damn holiday event. The kind you remember in therapy. I started by pulling up the vendor list his culture memo had linked to, an eye-watering spreadsheet of overpriced caterers, Daker firms, and experienced consultants. Everything double the price, triple the attitude. His preferred caterer billed themselves as elevated nostalgia cuisine. Their sample menu included things like deconstructed green bean casserole and artisanal jello flight. I didn't ask. Next, I opened the culture compliance portal he'd forced onto the entire ops department during his first week. Said it was a process innovation, but it was just a glorified form submission system with drop-downs that didn't work and an approval flow that led straight to him, which was perfect. He'd insisted everything go through there, from room bookings to morale budgets. Said it would eliminate bottlenecks. And reader, it did. Put all the accountability right on his lap. Every single expense, venue, food, music, games, I filed using his portal. Every quote was uploaded. Every form was labeled. Every single vendor contract was submitted through the Q4 engagements tag he created. No side emails, no handshakes, no gray areas. Just cold, clean bureaucracy, his own brand of poison. I even included his notes on the color scheme, blush and pine. Family-friendly activities, karaoke but for kids, and the signature cocktail, bourbon cider, which he said he invented, despite it being on Pinterest since 2009. And for each item, I selected the exact budget code he listed in his memo. Executive Morale Subsection B. You'd think someone who invented an entire workflow would at least read the fiscal policies it was supposed to enforce. He didn't, because Trent wasn't in the habit of reading anything longer than a tweet or more complex than a meme. His idea of compliance was slapping a smiley face on the spreadsheet and calling it a day. So when the final total came back, $8,497.42 to be exact, I sent it for approval. No flag, no pushback. He approved it with a thumbs-up emoji. I printed the email. Then I started building the binder. See, this wasn't just about revenge. This was about clarity. I wanted every person at the board table to be able to follow the breadcrumbs. I wanted no deniability, just clean, bureaucratic order. So I gathered everything. The culture memo with his signature, dated September 7, the budget approval policy update. He insisted finance adopt it to streamline quarterly morale spending, the vendor approval trail, his initials on every line. Signed requisition form, with Thanksgiving equals BIG vibes scribbled in the notes. I wasn't doing anything sneaky. I was doing everything by the book, his book. I was just making sure all the pages stayed together. And still, I smiled. I smiled when he walked by and said, "We're gonna break LinkedIn with this party, trust me." I smiled when he forwarded me his mock-up for the event invite, a cartoon turkey dabbing under a banner that read "Gratitude is mandatory." I smiled when he added himself as executive sponsor on the internal calendar event, and I made sure that change made it into the record. Nothing more, nothing less. When the day of the event came, I showed up 30 minutes early, handed off the check-in list, and left before the first mimosa was poured. I didn't stay for the speeches, or the pictures, or the part where Trent got tipsy and tried to lead the CFO in a group conga line. That was their moment. Mine was coming later. For now, I just watched the photos go up on Slack, watched the email from Trent go out thanking everyone for their willingness to embrace a new tradition of gratitude, and watched him bask in the glow of praise he hadn't earned. And beneath all that, I kept smiling, ice cold, unshaken, because I knew exactly where this story was headed, and I had the receipts. The Friday after Thanksgiving, while most of the office was either nursing turkey hangovers or pretending to work from home, I was at my desk early as always. Not because I had to be, but because I wanted to be the first to open the shared drive folder titled Q4 Holiday Events and download every humiliating pixel of the mandatory gratitude gala Trent had masterminded. There he was, front and center in every frame, holding a wine glass like it was a trophy, posing next to a balloon arch, gripping a microphone while making what I can only assume was a deeply inspirational speech about company spirit. He wore a blazer over a t-shirt that said "Thankful of Hustle," and at one point, someone caught him doing finger guns next to the CFO's toddler. The Slack thread was a carnival of forced praise. Great vibes, Trent. Such a fun event. Thanks for organizing. Morale through the roof. I recognized exactly zero of the people commenting. All new hires, all recent transfers, all people smart enough to suck up to the man who thought synergy was a personality trait. And Trent, God bless him, was eating it up like it was one of the vegan pumpkin cheesecakes he had flown in from Portland. An hour later, the all-hands email landed in every inbox. Subject line, "Thankful for you. Turkey briefcase," it read. In part, this week's event was a true expression of who we are at our core: bold, inclusive, future-forward. It was an honor to host our execs and their families in a space that celebrated our shared journey. Major thanks to everyone who helped bring this to life. This is only the beginning. There was no mention of my name, not in the body, not in the footer, not even a generic special thanks to the operations team. Nothing. I didn't flinch. Instead, I opened my personal folder, offline, encrypted, updated daily. Inside was the growing case file I'd been building like a quiet storm. It already had the scanned copy of the signed vendor agreement, with Trent's digital signature and IP log metadata, the original PDF of his culture compliance memo, complete with formatting errors and a misquoted Meyer Angelou line he'd swiped from a Tumblr blog. The final budget authorization form, proved at 6:32 p.m. on a Friday with a lol, "This is gonna slap" comment in the notes. And most importantly, the updated SEC compliance document from legal, dated October 2nd, clearly stating that any expense coded under executive morale exceeding $5,000 must include a board officer's signature and compliance log entry. It also had the section Trent had clearly skipped. Clause 8.3, line item misclassification or unauthorized signature on Q4 morale expenditures will be subject to internal audit and potential ethics board review. Oops. That little nugget came out of a quarterly filing panic back in July, after someone in product tried to expense a team retreat to Napa under training. Legal didn't want to repeat, so they updated the policy and quietly distributed the memo. Everyone important read it, everyone except Trent, of course. He was too busy brainstorming merch ideas for his culture refresh movement. I wish I were kidding. He pitched hoodies, with QR codes. Back in the office, I kept my head down and let him glow. He stopped by my desk once that week, leaned over the cubicle wall like a frat brother trying to sell crypto, and said, "You really pulled it off, Patty. Mad props. I feel like this is a new era, right? Like we're finally aligned. Glad you're happy," I said. He nodded, tossed a mini candy cane on my keyboard like he was Santa, and walked off humming Eye of the Tiger. I waited until he was gone before adding one more item to my folder, the MP3 file of our company-wide Zoom call from 2 weeks prior, where he'd laid out his new accountability ladder. At timestamp 1427, he'd explained with PowerPoint that all department heads would be personally liable for overages under $10,000 that didn't have co-signature support. And who had sent out that memo? Trent Dalton. Signed, timestamped, and attached to an internal Slack thread titled "No More Wiggle Room Face with Steam from Nose." I screenshotted that too. Let him take the credit, let him bask. Because the higher the man climbs on his own hype, the harder it is to hear the snapping rope beneath his feet. And me? I was just the quiet woman in the cubicle, organizing files, sending follow-ups, smiling, while the fuse burned quietly down the hallway. The blow didn't come with fireworks. It came in a 10-minute check-in with Marcy from HR, who wore pastel cardigans like armor and smiled like she'd been coached to do it in front of a mirror. Her tone was soft, almost apologetic, like she was breaking up with me on behalf of someone else. "We're realigning teams for Q1, she said, using the word realigning the way a dentist says pressure, trying to streamline workflows to better match our cultural goals. I tilted my head. "And what does that mean for me exactly?" She looked down at her screen, then back up with a rehearsed expression of concern. You'll be moving off project workflow. You want to better align your strengths with operational support rather than lead execution. Translation, sidelined. That meant no year-end bonus, no performance review, no Q1 planning session invites. No seat at the table. I'd helped build one spreadsheet at a time. It was death by politeness, HR style. A corporate smothering under a weighted blanket of buzzwords. I nodded once, just once. No questions, no objections. Marcy relaxed, like she'd been bracing for tears or yelling. That's what they expect when they gut you with a candy-coated knife. Then I smiled, just a little, just enough to make her shift in her chair. Do you need a copy of Trent's budget spreadsheet before I hand things off? I asked. He had some creative adjustments to the morale codes I wouldn't want lost in transition. Marcy blinked. Oh no, I think we're good. He said everything was already routed through culture compliance. Of course he did. That spreadsheet was a minefield, and she didn't even know she was standing on it. I left the meeting without another word, didn't even take the branded stress ball they kept in a dish near the door, walked straight to my desk, sat down, and opened the master calendar for the holiday event archive, deleted the recurring reminder labeled Q1 event planning, draft agenda. Gone. Then I opened my binder and started adding the new pages. Marcy's meeting summary, which she sent 20 minutes later, titled Role Realignment Notes Patricia B. The timestamp showing my account's access to project planning permissions was revoked exactly 11:59 a.m. A copy of the org chart with Trent's new dotted line strategic oversight of my former duties, which someone forgot to hide from public view on SharePoint. That one stung more than I'd expected. Not because I cared about the title, but because after 19 years of making things run, quietly, competently, I'd been boxed out by a man who thought a team sync was just another chance to show off his new ring light. The emails started trickling in before the afternoon was out. Hey Patricia, just looping you out of this. Hi Patricia, Trent will be taking point here. Thanks for your help, we'll take it from here. Like I was a chair being wheeled into storage. Useful once, but now mostly just in the way. I closed Outlook. Let the silence wash over me, let it sting. That night I didn't go home early. I stayed and cleared out my planner, tossed old notes. Shredded years of hand-scrawled to-do lists that no longer served me. But the folder on my desktop that stayed, I renamed it. Trent Dalton Ethics Packet Preliminary Draft. Then I locked my screen, put on my coat, and walked past Trent's office, where he was practicing a presentation to himself, pacing with AirPods in and gesturing like he was on Shark Tank. He didn't see me, didn't hear me, didn't realize that while he was busy plotting his next motivational TikTok speech, I was already halfway done writing the final chapter of his little empire. They wanted me out of the room? Fine. They forgot I built the damn walls, and I kept the blueprints. It happened by accident, like all the best revelations do. I was in the print room on the third floor, refilling paper in the tray because, of course, that task still somehow fell to me, even after my realignment. The whole floor was basically a ghost town, one of those strange in-between places in the office ecosystem where executives roamed but never settled. A liminal space filled with unused ergonomic chairs and potted plants surviving purely on artificial light and pity. The room shares a wall with one of the smaller conference rooms, the kind they use for quiet meetings, the kind they don't broadcast over Zoom. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, hell. I didn't even realize someone was in there until I heard the tail end of a sentence drift through the return vent above the copier. Under executive morale, it's got to be an officer's signature if it breaches 5K. Especially post-Q3 filing. My hand froze, fingers wrapped around a ream of paper halfway into the tray. Then a second voice, sharper, legal, responded, Dalton's name isn't on the signatory list. Never has been. The air in the room suddenly got colder. I stayed quiet, motionless. The first voice again, this one I knew, it was Phil, one of the auditors. Buttoned up, humorless, the kind of man who measured his steps and his syllables. If that went through under subsection B without board clearance, and it shows up on the quarterly, we're not talking about an internal slap on the wrist. That's exposure. Potential ethics violation. There was a pause, muffled typing. Then the legal rep, do we know who submitted the event? Another pause. Then Phil said, Patricia Barrett. But she routed it through the culture compliance chain. And that was the moment. That still, perfect moment where the universe stops spinning just long enough for you to realize the chessboard you've been playing on has more pieces than you thought, and you already moved yours into the perfect position. They didn't know I was listening, but I knew everything I needed. This wasn't just an embarrassing receipt. This wasn't just a smug little email with a price tag Trent couldn't cover. This was a procedural landmine wrapped in holiday tinsel and smug entitlement. Because if what Phil said was true, and trust me, Phil doesn't get out of bed unless the policy's printed in triplicate, then Trent hadn't just embarrassed himself. He'd unknowingly exposed the company to an undocumented expense violation tied directly to a compliance memo he himself pushed through during a publicized culture refresh. And the best part? I hadn't touched a damn thing. I had simply followed instructions, filed the forms, got the signatures he authorized, routed it through the systems he built. I hadn't forged, I hadn't faked. I hadn't manipulated a single byte of data. All I'd done was obey. And now the noose was braided from his own memo. I stepped out of the print room, face calm, ream of paper under my arm, and walked back to my desk with the stillness of someone who had just seen the final puzzle piece fall into place. Every light felt brighter. Every fluorescent flicker hummed like an omen. And in the pit of my stomach, the aching betrayal from earlier this week began to curdle into something cold, sharp, and strategic. Back at my desk, I opened my binder, slid in 2 new pages, a printout of the Q3 compliance update, clause 8.3 underlined in red, a screenshot of Trent's original culture memo where he stripped officer signature requirements for morale spending under $10K, forgot to account for the SEC addendum that superseded it. The pages slid in like blades into a holster. I didn't feel triumphant, not yet. What I felt was clarity. This wasn't about personal revenge anymore. This was about structural justice. And Trent? Trent was about to learn the difference between ownership and liability. He thought he could weaponize culture. Now he'd get to watch it explode in his own hands. I didn't gloat. That's the mistake people make in these moments. They get loud. They drop hints. They play it cool but can't resist letting a little triumph leak out in a smirk, a raised eyebrow, a cryptic "you'll see," not me. I made no noise. I became background again, a speck, a shadow in orthopedic flats. Let Trent shine. Let him fire off Slack emojis like he was ringing the closing bell. Let him bask in the synthetic glow of curated leadership while I lined up the pins behind the curtain. The board meeting invite came through on Wednesday afternoon. Subject line, Q4 compliance review plus holiday budget reconciliation. A nothing title. Just another mandatory circle jerk in a beige conference room. I RSVP'd yes. No note, no reply. I waited exactly 48 minutes, then forwarded the invite to my personal email. Not because I planned to attend, I had no intention of speaking unless forced, but because I needed it on the record that I'd been included. That same afternoon, I sent one email. Just one. To the finance team alias. Short, polite. Hi team, quick clarification. Can you confirm who signed off the final $8,497.42 expense filed under Executive Morale subsection B? I want to ensure documentation is aligned ahead of year-end archiving. Appreciate it. Best, Patricia B. No panic, no accusations. Just a harmless little paper trail whistling its way into the audit folder. I already knew the answer, of course. Trent had approved it himself via the Culture Compliance portal. Used his official credentials. I had the timestamp, the metadata, the IP match, and his god-awful approval comment. Let's gobble up some good vibes. Turkey fire, but I wanted them to say it. That was the key. Let the answer come from inside the house. While I waited, I finalized the folder. A plain, matte black presentation binder. Inside, 12 tabs, each labeled with a number. Tab 1, Trent's Culture Memo. Tab 2, Budget Policy Update Memo Q3. Tab 3, Vendor Agreement with line-by-line cost detail. Tab 4, Screenshot of the expense request submitted through Culture Compliance. Tab 5, Trent's Approval including Slack confirmation. Tab 6, Clause 8.3 of the SEC mandated filing update highlighted. Tab 7, Company org chart showing Trent's lack of signatory authority. Tab 8, Compliance logs from the portal. Tab 9, Email from Finance confirming his solo sign-off. Tab 10, Marcy's HR note reassigning me from project workflow. Tab 11, the memo where Trent stated morale overages under $10K wouldn't need further approvals, dated, signed, and shared company-wide. Tab 12, my email to finance asking the simple question that tied it all together. I printed it all on 20 ATLB resume paper, because if you're going to burn someone alive with receipts, you want the pages to have weight. Then, I printed one extra sheet. Cover page, Q4 Ethics Documentation Holiday prepared by Patricia Barrett, date, December 4, status, for legal review. I slid it into the front pocket of the binder and placed the whole thing inside a slim, sealed craft folder, the kind interns use for resume packets they hand to HR like it means something. I zipped it into my laptop bag, didn't even crease it. Then I sent one final calendar note to myself. Reminder, bring folder to board review. Don't speak unless asked. Let the document speak first. That night I ironed my blouse, not the bright one, the gray one. The one I wore during the 2016 restructuring meeting where I saved 7 jobs with a single spreadsheet and got a $10 Starbucks gift card in return. It had a coffee stain on the cuff from that day. I left it. Felt appropriate. Didn't sleep much. Not from nerves, from anticipation, like a calm before a snowfall. Not a storm, a silence. Because the louder someone is on their way up, the quieter the room gets when they finally fall. And Trent? He'd been very loud. Monday arrived like a loaded gun on the table, silent, heavy, waiting to go off. The boardroom was unusually full for compliance review. Probably because someone mentioned there'd be croissants, or maybe because the whispers had started. You could feel it just beneath the surface tension, like a wire pulled tight. Everyone smiling just a little too hard. Everyone suddenly interested in phrases like quarterly reconciliation and budget trail clarity. I walked in with my folder tucked neatly under one arm, like a polite guest bringing a casserole to a dinner party that was about to become a crime scene. Trent was already there, of course. Center seat, center smile, practically vibrating with the kind of ego that only comes from having done something wrong and being too dumb to know it yet. He was in full showman mode, blazer, no tie, AirPods dangling like trophies, gesturing with a caramel macchiato he didn't even sip. Look, he was saying to no one in particular, we've been stagnant, right? Culture-wise, this was about movement, about feeling like a team again. Not just performing tasks, but embodying synergy. Activated a moment. He actually used the phrase activated a moment. I deserve hazard pay for not laughing. One of the directors, a woman from legal with a face like a guillotine, was nodding, but slowly. Not in agreement. In that quiet, dangerous way people nod when they're watching someone dig a hole deeper with every word. The CEO looked tired, pale, paler than usual. I wondered if he'd been warned. Probably not, they never are. First 20 minutes went by in a flurry of graphs and nonsense. Trent had a slide deck, of course he did. There were photos from the party. A boomerang gif of him clinking champagne glasses with the head of sales. A pie chart labeled Vibes Boost Q4. Then the door opened. Phil, the auditor, walked in. Late as always, never flustered, never rushed. The kind of man who makes you nervous by how unbothered he looks. He carried one thing, a black binder, thick matte. Unassuming, without a word, he set it down on the table. Flipped it open. Slid a single sheet forward. Before we go further, he said, we need to address this. He tapped the page. The room stilled like it forgot how to breathe. The page read, Invoice hash F9387 Event Services $8,497.42 Executive Morale Subsection B. Phil didn't raise his voice. He never had to. This was filed without a co-signature, he said. Filed under a compliance-sensitive category. Our question is simple. Who approved it? For the first time all morning, Trent hesitated, just for a second. Then he smiled that lazy, shit-eating smile and said, oh yeah, that was Patricia's idea. She coordinated it. I just gave her the green light. She's been here forever, knows how this stuff works. All eyes turned to me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I reached into my folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. My copy of the Q3 compliance memo. Then I said one sentence. Per section 12.4, that line item required officer-level signature. The air left the room like a pulled plug. Phil took the paper, checked the section. The director from legal blinked once, then twice. Trent laughed too loudly. I mean, come on, we're talking about a holiday party. Phil looked up, face flat. We're talking about a violation of Q4 federal filing standards tied directly to a morale fund earmarked for officer oversight. If this expense wasn't cleared by someone with board signatory access, we've got a problem. A documented one. You could hear the blood draining from Trent's face. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried to speak again. I thought, he started. The CEO leaned forward. You thought? That's when I knew it had begun. The binder was open. Fuse was lit, and all I had to do now was wait for the explosion. Phil didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just turned the binder with the elegance of a priest flipping to the scripture at a funeral. The invoice was still there, glaring in stark black and white. $8,497.42. Coded Executive Morale Subsection B. No officer signature. No clearance. Before we go further, he said, calm as a winter pond, you need to establish procedural authorship. That's when I reached into my own folder, pulled a single sheet, cream-colored, crisp, printed on the same heavy stock I use for vendor contracts, and slid it across the table like a final poker chip. It was dated September 11. Header, Culture Compliance Policy Refresh V2.0 signed at the bottom. Trent Dalton, Director of People Strategy. I didn't say anything. Phil took it. Read the first two paragraphs, then looked up and locked eyes with Trent. This is your policy, Mr. Dalton, he said. Trent blinked. What? Phil tapped the paper. You wrote it. You removed the multi-signature requirement for morale spend under $10K but failed to reconcile that change with the board-level SEC compliance memo issued 3 weeks prior. That memo, also in this binder, takes precedence. Legal reached for the document. Read it. Then leaned back slowly, like gravity had just gotten heavier. This violates your own SEC compliance update, she muttered. The CEO finally spoke. What kind of exposure are we looking at? Phil didn't blink. It depends. If we report it, we may be able to self-correct with minimal impact. If we don't, and it's flagged in the quarterly filing, it's a direct ethics violation. Trent started to say something, but nothing came out. Just a half-formed vowel and a throat click. He glanced at me like maybe I'd rescue him. Like maybe the woman he'd sidelined, mocked, erased might suddenly step in and say he didn't mean it. Let's give him another chance. Instead, I stood, smooth, deliberate. I pulled out the full folder. 12 tabs, every form, every receipt, every screenshot. I didn't slam it. I didn't toss it. I placed it. Right in front of legal. Like a surgeon laying down a scalpel. I'll be working remote for the rest of the month, I said, voice even, not cold, just done. My work is documented. No one moved. The CEO's hand was trembling slightly as he turned over the signed memo again. You could see it, his brain catching up. the exact moment he realized he hadn't just hired his nephew into a vanity role. He'd handed him the company's procedural throat and watched him saw through it with a smile. Trent looked like someone had removed the bones from his legs. He wasn't sitting anymore, he was folding. Slowly, internally, his face pale, sweat blossoming under his arms like ink in water. Phil closed the binder, no more words, just the sound of the folder sliding across the table. The light tap as legal picked it up. The soft click of my laptop bag zipper as I packed up. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like a courtroom just after the verdict lands. I didn't look back as I left, didn't gloat, didn't flinch. I walked out past the holiday decor in the lobby, tinsel half falling off the faux pine garland, a ceramic snowman missing one eye. The receptionist looked up at me wide-eyed. I gave her the smallest nod, and then I went home. I reheated my untouched Thanksgiving dinner, mashed potatoes, sweet corn, cranberry sauce that still held the shape of the can. I poured a glass of wine, sat down, and for the first time in a long, long while, I ate in peace. No Slack pings, no calendar invites, no Trent, just silence. And the clean, perfect satisfaction of knowing the system worked because I made it obey me one last time. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.